Welcome to the part 3 of our YouTube series, Creating Your FEM Right the First Time. For the part 3 of the series, I'm going to share with you some guidelines about solving the model. We will address the challenges of running simulations. We'll discuss how to interpret the solver log files, troubleshoot the convergence issues, and adjust the solution parameters to ensure successful and reliable results. I like to say this is where the magic of FEA really comes to life. Even if your model is solved without any convergence problems, look at the log file written by the solver to check for warning messages. They may be harmless, but they may indicate some problem in defining your model. Problems are usually reported by the program with warning or error messages. You can also see that your model has not converged if the final load increment in the history is not the last load increment you specified in the model definition. There are two reasons for convergence problems. First, the solution algorithms may fail to find a solution even if a solution of the problem does exist. In this case, changing the solution algorithm may solve the problem. On the other hand, the problem definition may be faulty so that the problem is unstable and does not have a solution. So solving the model means also manage the convergence problems. Let's see here how to deal with the convergence issues. First, use a post-processor software to identify the nodes with the largest residual force and the largest change in displacement in the final increment before the divergence. Often, but not always, this tells you where the problem in the model occurs. I mean the problem of convergence. The definition of the load increments for a nonlinear solution is also important. If, for example, you abruptly change the applied loads at a certain point of the load increment, the incremental process may not capture the exact point at which the change occurs. So define the load steps to ensure that the moment of the abrupt change actually corresponds to a load increment in the simulation. It will improve convergence because it allows to control the increments at the moment of abrupt change. With modern FEA software, if convergence is not obtained by the solver, the last load step is automatically reduced by doing cutbacks. Usually the last load step is cut in half. The program stops if the load increment is too small or if the convergence problems persist after several cutbacks of the load increment. Your FEA software will imprint the error message like load increment smaller than minimum or too many attempts, and you will find those messages in the log file. Okay? However, these messages themselves do not tell you anything about the reason of the convergence problems. To find the cause of the convergence problems, look at the solver log file in the increments before the final error message. You will see warnings that tell you what kind of convergence problem occurred. For example, it could be the residual force is too large, the contact algorithms did not converge, or the load increments were too large. Have a look at the last converged load increment. Frequently, large changes in some quantity may indicate the location of the problem. Personally, I like to look at the displacements. If the first load increment does not converge, set the size of the first increment to a very small value. If the problem persists, it means that the model itself is unstable, and most of the time it is due to missing boundary conditions, like a rigid body motion, or initial overlap of contacting surfaces. To find the cause of the convergence problem, simplify your model step by step. First of all, make sure that the model is properly constrained. By that I mean all the rigid body motions are removed. Use simpler material laws if you run a nonlinear material solution. For example, use elasticity instead of plasticity. Also, switch off nonlinear geometry if you activated it. Okay? It will help you identify the source of nonlinearity. You should also remove all the external loads step by step. If the problem persists, try to create a minimum example. The smallest example you can find that shows the same problem. This approach has several advantages. The first one, it is a minimum example is easier to analyze. Also, it needs less computing time, so it runs faster. Okay? It can also be shared to others if you are looking for help. Because if your model is really complex, it's too big, you cannot share it. If you simplify, it is smaller and it's easier to share and to explain the problem to another person. To conclude with solving the model, let's talk about solution parameters. If your solution algorithms does not converge for numerical reasons, the following guidelines may help. Note that they are useless if there is a true model instability. First, keep in mind that finite element programs use default values to control the Newton-Raphson iterations. If no convergence is reached after a fixed number of iterations, the load step is cut back. In strongly nonlinear problems, these default values may be too tight. For example, some FEA software cut back on the load increment if the Newton-Raphson algorithms do not converge after 4 or 5 iterations. So, setting this number to a larger value is often sufficient to reach convergence. Personally, I like to set this parameter to at least 25. If due to cutbacks, the load step becomes smaller than a predefined minimum value, the simulation stops with an error message. If due to the cutbacks, the load step becomes smaller than a predefined minimum value, the simulation stops with an error message. This minimum size of the load increment can be adjusted. Finally, if the convergence cannot be obtained with the Newton-Raphson algorithm, like for buckling problem, for example, use an arc length method, for example, Crisfield or Rick's algorithm. So see you for the next part of the series, creating your FEM right the first time, which will be dedicated to post-processing and the conclusion. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content. Also, feel free to contact me via email or on LinkedIn. Thank you for watching.